Hello there everybody, it's Shrouded Hand here. I was trying to think of what I would do for a Halloween episode, and I thought I'd just have a bit of fun today because ever since I was a kid I've been obsessed with ghosts and all things spooky, and I collect books about weird phenomenon. And some of these books I've had since I was a kid, and I remember very well looking at these pictures in these books and getting extremely spooked by them. So I thought it'd be interesting to look at some of these in a bit more depth. Before I start, I want to point out I have a gaming channel and I stream most evenings on Twitch. I mostly play horror games. If that's your kind of thing, come check me out. Most of the time when people find my channels, they say, hey, I didn't know you did this. So obviously I don't do a good job of advertising it. So there you go, now you know. Come check me out. I'll start with this photo. It's called The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. It's thought by a lot of people to be one of the most authentic photos of a ghost ever taken. So let's give a little backstory to this. The photo comes from Raynham Hall in Norfolk, England, and it was taken in 1936. Now apparently for many years people had been seeing the phantom of a lady in a brown dress climbing or descending the stairs. The identity of the brown lady is thought to be Dorothy Walpole, who in July of 1713 married the Viscount Charles Townshend. They lived together in Raynham Hall, and Dorothy gave birth to 7 children. Now, according to some stories, Charles Townshend was a violent and jealous husband. He found out that Dorothy had had an affair, and in a fit of jealousy, he locked her into one of the rooms of the house and denied her access to her own children. In March of 1726, Dorothy died. Depending on which version of the story you believe, she either remained imprisoned in that room and eventually died of smallpox, or she was pushed down the stairs, probably by Charles Townshend himself. Other versions of the story say that her funeral in 1726 was a fake, and Dorothy was still imprisoned in Raynham Hall and she actually died years later. The details are kind of murky. It's hard to figure out the truth behind what actually did happen to Dorothy Walpole. The first recorded sighting of the brown lady wouldn't come for around another 100 years. 1835, there was a Christmas party at Raynham Hall and a number of high-profile guests were attending. Some of them were staying the night in Raynham Hall. Now, one of these guests was a Major Loftus. He and a friend named Hawkins were retiring to their bedrooms when they saw the brown lady walking down a corridor. They said that they were amazed by the old-fashioned clothing that she was wearing, a long flowing brown dress. The following night, Major Loftus saw the figure again. This time he got a closer look at her face and he noted that she had completely empty eye sockets, as if her eyes were missing. Over the following years, the figure of the brown lady was seen many times, and many people who saw the figure noted its similarity to a portrait of Dorothy Walpole. So, onto the photo itself. On the 19th of September 1936, at around 4 p.m, 2 photographers from London arrived to photograph Raynham Hall. These photographers were Captain Hubert C. Provand and Mr. Indri Shearer. They were sent there by Country Life magazine to take pictures of the interior. They'd heard the stories about the apparition and they set up the camera at the bottom of the stairs to take a picture of the area. They took some regular pictures of the staircase, and just as they were starting to pack away the equipment, Mr. Shearer said that he could see a faint figure descending the staircase. Captain Provand quickly took a photograph, and this is what he captured. An eerie spectral image of what looks like a woman descending the staircase. Over the intervening years, the photograph has been reproduced many times. Now, apparently, a lot of the time when you see this image, it's very cropped in, and I can't find an uncropped image of it. Apparently, it appears uncropped in a 1973 book called Haunted Britain, but I can't find a copy of this book for less than 50 quid, so I haven't got it. I found some very poor quality versions of the uncropped image. What these apparently show is a lot of light bleed around the edge of the photograph, and this has led some people to believe that the image in the centre might be some sort of defect in the photograph itself. There's also an issue with a certain amount of blurriness in the photograph. The picture apparently was taken quite hurriedly and the camera wasn't quite stable, so there is a little bit of jarring in the image itself. If you look closely at some of the lines, they appeared a bit blurred and a bit sort of doubled up. This has led some people to speculate that it could be the result of a double exposure. Maybe you get two photographs, one which shows the empty stairs and the other which shows a person walking down them with a sheet over their head, and you superimpose them over the top of one another and you get this transparent ghostly image on the final photograph. I've read a few skeptical analyses of this image, and some of them I'm not really sure if I quite buy into them. For example, this one I found which says, on the left hand side as the viewer sees the picture hangs a framed picture on the wall. Immediately beneath, seemingly hovering in the air, is a duplicate image of this picture. Now, I cannot see this duplicate image of the picture hanging in the air. Maybe it's just my eyes, or maybe the copy of the picture I've got is just not good enough. What I can see is a picture frame with a shadow underneath it. The main defect that I can see in this, which is the best version of this photograph that I could find, seems to be this banister, which does look a bit faint and out of place. Some people have said that if you look at the staircase, you can see an extra set of stairs hovering above the ones that are there. Again, I can't see this. That's what a lot of skeptics have said about this picture, that it could be a double exposure. So yeah, the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. Is it a ghost photograph? Is it a double exposure, or simply a photographic error of some sort? I'll leave that up to you to decide. Okay, next up. This is not a photograph that I remember seeing as a child, and when I saw it later on in life, it was on places like 4chan, so I always assumed it was just a Photoshop. But apparently now it's considered a famous ghost photograph. It's known as the Cooper family photo. The story behind it is that the picture was taken sometime in the 1950s. It shows the Cooper family from Texas. They'd bought an old house and they'd moved into it. On the first night that they moved in, the father took a photo of the family posing there, but when the photos were developed, they saw this eerie body hanging from the ceiling. According to this site, the first known version of this picture appeared in 2009, posted on Thomas Ligotti Online, titled Family Gathering. Apparently also, since then, someone named Robert Copper has come forward to confirm that this picture is actually of him and his brother, and it was taken in 1959. Many people have suggested it could just be the image of a ballerina that's been superimposed on top of the photograph itself. As far as I know, nobody's found the actual original image of the ballerina that was used. Yeah, there you go. That's my thoughts on the Cooper or Copper family photograph. Okay, this one is the Goddard Squadron photograph, which supposedly shows the ghost of Freddie Jackson. The picture was taken in 1919 by Sir Victor Goddard. He was an RAF officer and he was taking a photograph of his squadron at HMS Daedalus training facility, which was in Hampshire, England. Now, according to the story, most of the people photographed here had recently got back from a funeral for Freddie Jackson. Freddie was an engineer who 3 days earlier had been hit by a whirling propeller and he'd been killed instantly. Now, if you look carefully towards the back of the photograph, just behind this guy's head here, you can see the faint, eerie outline of another face, and you'll notice that this is the only person in the image who isn't wearing a hat. Now, many people swear that this is the face of Freddie Jackson, the man who was killed 3 days before the photo was taken. Now, one of the best investigations into this photograph comes from Blake Smith on skeptic.com. He's done a lot of research into the story behind the image. I'll link 2 of his articles in the description below. Give him a read because they're very interesting. Yeah, what he found was that he actually did found the death record of someone called Frederick George Jackson. The only thing is he died in 1918, whereas the photograph was supposedly taken in 1919 and Freddie was said to have died 3 days earlier. So there is a bit of a discrepancy there. There's also the fact that he's recorded as having died in hospital in Sheffield, which according to Blake's research is 225 miles away from the base. He says that this is strange when, according to the story, Jackson had died immediately after being hit with the propeller. So yeah, there is a slight bit of inconsistency between the story of the photograph and the actual recorded events. Some people have suggested that the picture could simply be the person who Freddy is seen standing behind. It could just be him. He's slightly shifted to one side as the photo is being taken, and it left behind a sort of after image of his face, so it looks like he's got somebody behind him. I'm not sure if I really buy this, because the figure behind him is clearly not wearing a hat. You can see more of his forehead. Anyway, an eerie image. Does it show the ghost of Freddie Jackson? I'll let you decide. So this photograph really appealed to me as a child because it was taken in a place called Wem in Shropshire. Wem is a place that I used to go a lot as a child. We used to have a lot of holidays there. On November 19th, 1995, the town hall in Wem burned down. There was a photographer present called Tony O'Reilly, and he took a number of pictures of the fire itself. When Tony eventually got the pictures developed, he was shocked to see in one of the pictures the ghostly image of a girl watching him from one of the balconies. She seemed to be standing there quite calmly, and most bizarrely of all, she seemed to be standing right in the middle of the inferno. Mr. O'Reilly sent the pictures off to the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. They then sent the photo and negatives off to a Dr. Vernon Harrison, who was the former president of the Royal Photographic Society. Dr. Harrison analysed the pictures, and he says that it didn't seem to have been doctored. Many people have speculated over who the girl in the photograph could be. Some have said that it could be the ghost of Jane Churm. This was a 14-year-old girl who, in 1677, knocked over a candle which caused a massive fire and apparently burnt down a church as a result. According to local legend, Jane Churm was so remorseful about causing this fire that over the years since her death, her ghost has been seen at various fires around Wem. Some have even suggested that her ghost actually caused many of these fires. So, does this photograph show the ghost of Jane Churm? Well, maybe not. See, in 2010, a local newspaper ran a feature where they reproduced various old photographs from the area, and one of them was a postcard from 1922. It showed a street scene, and in the corner was a girl who looked strikingly similar to the Wem ghost girl. This was spotted by a pensioner named Brian Lear, and yes, if we do superimpose these two images over the top of each other, it does seem very, very similar. Unless somehow this is also a photograph of the ghost of Jane Churm, then I would probably consider this photograph to be quite soundly debunked, which is a shame because I've always loved this photograph. I've always found it really creepy, but yeah, they do look very similar. So yeah, there you go, the ghost of Wem. Okay, this is a story that always creeped me out as a kid. I remember reading in a book about the events of the Amityville haunting, and it always sent a shiver up my spine. I remember reading about them seeing the face of a pig with glowing red eyes looking in through one of the children's bedroom windows, and the thought of that kept me awake on many a night. So naturally I was always interested in the events of the Amityville haunting, and this photograph was probably the icing on the cake. So I'm sure a lot of people already know the events of the Amityville haunting. It's one of the most famous ghost stories ever to exist, but if you don't, I'll go very briefly over the events. These events took place at a house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, which is in Long Island, New York. On November the 13th, 1974, a man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. took a rifle and shot all 6 members of his family dead. According to him, he'd been hearing voices commanding him to kill his family. He said that he'd seen a black hooded figure, and he claimed that he'd felt as if possessed by some demonic force. A year later, a family moved into the house, George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children. Immediately after moving in, they say that they began to experience strange phenomena. Doors banging in the middle of the night, a strange green substance was seen to be oozing down the walls. George Lutz would awaken at 3:15 a.m. every day. This apparently was the exact same time that Ronald DeFeo Jr. had killed his family. After 28 days of living in the house, the phenomena got so bad that the Lutzes fled. Now, I don't know what you believe about the Amityville haunting. It's one of those cases that's interested me, and if you look up online, pretty much everybody says that it's a complete hoax. There was a best-selling book written about the case, which then turned into a whole series of movies, and it's my opinion that the story has been highly embellished both by the book and by the movies. There's even supposedly a confession from William Weber. This is Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s defense lawyer. Apparently he claims that he and the Lutzes decided to fabricate the entire story. The only thing is that when William Weber made that statement, he was trying to sue the Lutzes to get a better cut of the profits from the Amityville books and movies. If he could convince courts that he had helped to create the story, then he would have been entitled to a bigger share of the profits. So it kind of calls into question the confession a little bit. I'm still not sure whether the whole thing was a hoax. From what I've looked at, a lot of the family stories remained consistent, but they don't quite match what was written in the books. So anyway, this brings us on to the photograph itself. This picture was taken in 1976. The photographer was a man named Gene Campbell, who was working with Ed and Lorraine Warren as part of a paranormal investigation team. He'd set up an infrared camera to take pictures of the second floor landing. One of the pictures he took seemed to capture the eerie image of a boy looking out of a doorway with what looks like glowing eyes. So, who could the boy in the photograph actually be? Some people have said that it could be John DeFeo. This was one of Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s murder victims. If you put a picture of John DeFeo next to this picture of the ghost, they've got the same turned up nose, the same sort of face shape, and what looks like a similar hairstyle. Other people have speculated that it could simply be a man named Paul Bartz. This was another paranormal investigator who was there with the Warrens at the same time. He can be seen in a number of photographs here, and if you look at his shirt and then we look back at the ghost photograph, if we look between the banisters, we can see what looks like a checky shirt. What could be happening here is that Paul Bartz is in this room and he's just stuck his head out at the wrong time and accidentally got caught on camera, and what looks like glowing eyes is actually just a reflection of his glasses. I think this is quite a plausible explanation. He has got a kind of young face, which, if photographed from the right angle, might make him look like a spooky ghost child, I suppose. So yeah, that's the Amityville ghost boy. Whether it's a real paranormal image or not, it's still very creepy, and no matter how much I try and rationalize it, it still gives me a little shiver down my spine. I don't know why. Anyway, finally, let's look at what's probably my favorite ghost photograph. It could so easily be faked, but it is also incredibly creepy. This photograph was taken in 1963 in the Church of Christ the Consoler in the grounds of Newby Hall in North Yorkshire. The photographer was the Reverend Kenneth Lord. He says that he was simply going around the church taking photographs, and when he got them developed, he was shocked to see this terrifying hooded figure standing at the altar. He claims that there was no figures present when he took the image, and he didn't doctor the photograph in any way. The fact that he's a reverend seems to add a bit more credence to this story. Many people have speculated that the figure could be a 16th century monk, and his face is covered in some kind of white shroud, possibly because this monk suffered from leprosy or some kind of facial disfigurement. The only problem with this identification is that the church wasn't actually built until 1876. So why would a 16th century monk be standing there? Some people have also claimed that the figure must be around 9 feet tall, which means that if the Reverend wanted to hoax the photograph, it would be quite difficult to do. This picture by Matt Sedgley shows that an average height man standing on a church kneeling pillow is about the same height as the ghost. The photo could easily be faked. The Reverend does seem an unlikely character to try and hoax an image like this, so it does make me wonder whether, if it is indeed fake, somebody got hold of his camera and decided to play a prank on him. It's possible. Or maybe it really is a ghost. Who knows? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that look at ghost photographs. As I say, these pictures have always fascinated me since I was a child, and I've always wanted to cover them in a video, so Halloween was the perfect opportunity. Well, thanks for watching. Thank you to everyone on Patreon for supporting the channel. Thank you very much indeed, and have a great Halloween, everybody. If you take any pictures this Halloween, make sure you study them carefully. You never know what you've captured. Until next time, goodbye.